All right, let's jump straight into this explainer and cut through all the noise surrounding the 2026 cross-platform software landscape. Look, if you're building digital products right now, you already know the ecosystem has matured in a massive way. But with so much hype out there, we really need to sit down and look at the hard data. We're going to examine the actual reality of the top tools we're using, this massive shift in how we write code, and uncover what literally drives a project's success or failure today. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this, the cross-platform market has just exploded to a staggering $121 billion this year. Teams are consistently hitting 30 to 40% faster development cycles compared to building traditional native apps. But here's the absolutely crucial takeaway from all the empirical data we've dug into. Simply picking the hottest framework rarely dictates if your business actually succeeds. The tools are phenomenal, for sure, but the context, like your team's specific capabilities and your market window, that's what actually moves the needle. So here is our roadmap for today. First up, the 2026 framework landscape. Second, the adoption hiring gap. Third, the AI productivity debt paradox. Fourth, the reality of vibe coding. And finally, we'll wrap with some practical heuristics for your teams. Okay, Section 1, the 2026 framework landscape. Let's break down how the Big Four are actually stacking up right now. Flutter is holding a commanding 46% of the market, and its superpower is giving you incredibly strong shared UI consistency across pretty much every platform, though, yeah, your team does have to swallow that Dart learning curve. Then you've got React Native leveraging that absolutely massive JavaScript talent pool, even if desktop support still has some messy complexities. Kotlin Multiplatform, or KMP, is growing super fast at around 23% because it bridges native integration so beautifully, despite those sometimes tricky Gradle builds. And finally, Tauri has totally emerged as the undisputed champion of the lightweight desktop space. Now let's zoom in on React Native for a second. Its totally revamped new architecture isn't just a promise anymore, it is fully here in version 0.82. They completely ripped out the legacy system. The resulting benchmark leaps are just wild. We are seeing up to an 80% drop in cold start times. 80%. Add to that a 60% drop in dispatch latency and idle RAM usage getting slashed right in half. It is a massive, massive leap forward for production apps. And on the desktop side of things, Tauri is basically leaving Electron in the dust by using system web views and Rust. You end up with shockingly small binaries. We're talking typical app sizes of just 3 to 10 megabytes, compared to Electron's 50 to 150 megabytes. It's almost microscopic memory usage with cold starts under half a second. And with Tauri 2 now targeting iOS and Android 2, it's definitely a framework you need to keep your eye on. Moving on to Section 2, the adoption hiring mismatch. If we look strictly at developer adoption, Flutter is the undisputed king of mobile right now at 46%. A big driver of this is their Impeller rendering engine, which is now the default on iOS and newer Androids. It essentially guarantees that high visual consistency everyone wants. But here's where things get super interesting. Despite Flutter's massive adoption lead, US job postings for React Native actually outnumber Flutter postings by a factor of 6 to 1. So why does that matter to us? Because it completely proves that existing talent pools carry way more weight than raw technical benchmarks when companies actually go out and hire. Having access to that deep well of JavaScript and React developers will often override any framework comparison when you just need to get a product shipped. That brings us perfectly to Section 3, the AI productivity debt paradox. We really need to define what's happening in the enterprise space right now with AI-assisted development. We're seeing a severe productivity debt paradox. Basically, AI gets your software off the ground incredibly fast, but then it turns around and heavily taxes your team with technical debt, security flaws, and massive verification efforts down the line. We are generating code faster than ever, but generation without governance, that is a dangerous game. Check this out. A massive analysis of 400 billion lines of enterprise code found that AI-generated output now accounts for 1.9% of all production code. Now, 1.9% might sound like a drop in the bucket, but across the entire global software ecosystem, that is a staggering mountain of automated, machine-generated logic running in production right this second. But here is the dark side. This AI-generated code exhibits twice as many security violations as code written by human engineers, literally double. AI agents are fantastic at syntax, they really are, but they are incredibly naive about the deep contextual security architecture of your specific company. it gets worse. 86% of this generated code falls below recommended maintainability ratings. So developers are churning out all this code to hit productivity metrics, but then they're stuck paying this massive verification tax. They have to spend their valuable time and your expensive AI tokens just untangling and fixing the very output that was supposed to save them time. And this has a very real financial impact. We're talking an estimated 870,000 euros per system in lost development time every single year due to this debt. And here is the real kicker. Once a code-based architecture hits about 100,000 lines, those AI productivity gains vanish entirely. The system just gets too complex for the large language models to track, and your engineers are left holding the bag on an unmaintainable mess.
Let's look at Section 4, Vibe Coding Reality.
To really understand how this paradox happens, you have to look at the explosive rise of vibe coding. The raw prototyping velocity here is just undeniable. After Google I/O 2026 launched native prompt-to-app features, 250,000 Android apps were spun up in a single week, zero handwritten code. We had users reporting building 3 entirely distinct apps in a single afternoon. The creative velocity is absolutely staggering. But as the Software Improvement Group brilliantly pointed out, AI doesn't automatically fix a team's bad habits. It simply acts as a massive amplifier for whatever governance and architecture standards your team already has in place. If you have weak controls, AI just helps you accumulate technical debt faster than humanly possible. But if you have strong governance, that's when you can safely harness all that speed. Which brings us to our final section, practical heuristics for teams. So how do we translate all this into a playbook? First, select your frameworks based on reality, not prestige benchmarks. Go with Flutter when broad shared UI and visual consistency are your top priorities. Choose React Native when you need to tap into that massive JavaScript hiring pool. Lean toward KMP if your team has deep Kotlin experience and needs flexible native integration. And for sure, consider Tari for lightweight desktop apps. Second, when dealing with AI, use it aggressively for exploration and prototyping. Ride that vibe coding wave to test ideas fast, but lock it down before production. Treat that verification tax as a mandatory budgeted cost. You absolutely must impose rigorous architecture reviews and strict enterprise governance. Never, ever ship a vibe-coded app straight to production without human testing. At the end of the day, frameworks and AI are just tools. They don't replace engineering discipline. And since we don't have the 5-year maintenance data on these AI-generated code bases yet, I want to leave you with this critical question to take back to your teams. Look at your pipelines, look at your code base, and ask yourself, in the age of AI coding, are we actually accelerating delivery, or are we just accelerating deterioration? Think about it and make sure your governance is ready for what's coming.